I'm going to do something that I normally don't do, which is a tier list. This is a purely subjective opinion thing. This is not like trying to rank them, saying this is the absolute ranking of a weapon and how good or bad it is. This is for me. How does the weapon feel to me as I play it in the demo for Monster Hunter Rise? So I'm over here on tiermaker.com and we've got all the weapons. And basically you just take a weapon and you can drag it to wherever you want, which is pretty cool. So we're just going to step down through these weapons. I'm going to give you my personal take, so please don't get offended by any of these. And let's see what I thought about all the weapons in Monster Hunter. First off, we have the Great Sword. Now, this is the most iconic weapon of pretty much the series, right? It's huge, it's bulky, but I gotta say, it's slow as molasses. You take out the weapon and you can barely move. The game expects you to, spend 100 hours to learn the monster, because if you try to charge up, this thing takes like 3 to 4 seconds to actually hit a monster and do damage. If you don't know ahead of time 3 moves, we're talking like master level grand chess here. You got to know the moves, know where they're going to be afterwards, and then you can punish them. I can see how that's rewarding, but for a beginner, it's daunting. And for the average player, like, it's just not very feel good. Just be, walking slow and having to self-commit to all these moves. I'm sorry, but this is D tier for me. There's just too many, demerits to using this weapon. Next up is the longsword. So we'll start out by pushing everything in B and then we'll sort of evaluate it. So I will admit, the longsword has great damage. If we're just looking at damage alone, I would put it probably in the S tier. But this weapon was basically designed to trip your teammates. It just swings wildly all over the arena, knocking everybody around you, where they're only going to do like half the damage they normally would have did. So it actually really, really brings down your team. The thing is way too anime. It feels weird. Like, you don't feel like a Monster Hunter with it. You feel more like you're in, like Naruto or some anime or something like that. For the reason of tripping all your teammates, feeling a little too anime, and just, all the self-management you have to do. You have like 3 gauges. Some moves decrease a gauge, some increase it. It's just so much homework that you have to do for this weapon. It's too high maintenance, so I'm going to have to put it in the D tier. Next up is the Sword and Shield. Now, this is a weapon that is much faster, so it definitely bypasses the issues here of the Great Sword. But the damage output for each one of these hits is like 20, 30 damage, if that? Like, it's nowhere near as powerful as any of these other 2 weapons, even though it's faster. You've got way too many things that you can do. You can guard, you can use your wire bug, you can use your items with your weapon out. It's so easy to have a misinput on your controller and do something that you weren't planning on doing, that honestly, it's just too complex. I mean, I could see this if it was Tekken or like a technical game with, combos and inputs, but this is Monster Hunter, right? It should feel a little bit more simple. We're already doing tons of stuff like moving around a 3D arena, so I'm sorry, it's out of place. It's too complex, so this is going in the lower D tier for me. Next up, we have the dual blades. This is by far the fastest of the weapons, but it's also the weakest. Single digit damage, like, hello? Who wants to be going around looking really badass and then you hit a monster and you did 5 damage? Like, come on. Like, yeah, okay, we have lots of little 3s and 2s floating around, but guess what? It doesn't really add up. They give you a silk bind where you can tether to a monster and you can do like 100 damage, but, it's slow to recharge. It's really easy to miss with. So the dual blades, I think, is just trying to mask the fact that its power for each hit is just way too low. And the elemental damage in this demo is non-existent. It's horrible. So D tier for me. Next up is the hammer. Now, the hammer by its lone self, I think, is actually pretty fun. It does big damage. It can KO monsters, but come on, face it. After you KO a monster 1 or 2 times, you're not going to get a 3rd KO, and if you do, it's already the end of the hunt. So the whole selling point of this weapon is really only viable for the first, 4 minutes of a hunt. And as you use it, every move looks and feels the same. You're just pounding in the monster's head. Like, where's the fun in that? You don't even get to enjoy cutting off tails, moving around the monster. You're just always stuck to the head. So, I don't know, like, you play the same hunt over and over again, it feels the same every time. So, I think just for based on the fact that it's pretty boring, hammer has to be D rank for me, I'm sorry. And next up is the hunting horn. Now, this weapon used to be very interesting. It was complex but rewarding, had tons of buffs, you can encore, it was a great support weapon, And now they just made it for dummies. You just hit a button and you destroy the monster. It doesn't even matter which button you hit. They all pretty much look the same. You're just spinning around doing some, capoeira dance moves. You hit the monster in the head, and it's like the same problem as Hammer. You're just glued to the head, just doing the same move over and over again. You can play songs really easily in buff hunters, but guess what? Once you get the buff, playing the songs doesn't matter anymore. You're not going to get more buff. So you're basically just playing them for nothing. You're wasting all your notes. So the hunting horn, for the fact that they took away all of its complexity and they made it way too simple, and the fact that you end up whiffing and wasting most of your songs because they're already active, I'm sorry, it's D rank. Next up is the lance. Now the lance on its own seems pretty decent. You can guard really well. You can poke at monsters with precision, but let's face it, you're only going up against monsters that are not that powerful. You can guard with a sword and shield and be just as safe. You don't need this huge bulky shield. What you lose is all the mobility. You're basically stuck to the ground, or you have to do this charge move, which sucks you out of stamina, which is horrible because you need the stamina to guard. It's always give or take. You're always losing something to do something with the lance. The Silkbind arts, like the first one, you tether to a monster. It's weird, it's complex, it's inaccurate. You can't even aim and hit a part. And the other one, you can do a super counter, which you can already do, and you gain power for the next 5 seconds? It's way too temporary. So for being too busy, too bulky, when we really don't need it, this thing's going D tier, I'm sorry. Next up, we have the gunlance. This is similar to the lance, except just take all mobility and throw it out the door, and replace it with shelling, which sounds good on paper, but shelling means that you're going to do the same damage no matter what. What's the point? You can have a weak part, you can hit the face, you can hit the foot. Nope, same damage every time. That's brain dead. There's no strategy involved. You just sit there poking and shelling at monsters and then having to manage your shells. Ugh, don't get me into that. That thing is so tedious. Gunlance, because it can't move, its damage is fixed and capped. I'm sorry, but that's D tier for me. And now we get into the more complex weapons. First up is the switch axe. Identity complex, anybody? This thing's got two completely different weapons thrown into one. You've got this sword and then you've got this axe, and the weapon can't even decide which one it wants you to place. So it makes them completely equal, and switching between them kind of pointless. I mean, the whole point is to switch between them, right? But if they're basically the same power, what's the point? It's got this weird build-up thing for an amp state, which is complex. The game barely tells you about it. And it takes 10 years to charge up, and then it's over in 20 seconds. I don't know. So you're building up for this huge reward, which doesn't feel very rewarding. The arts are great, but you take damage when you do them. I mean, you could just easily accidentally die doing one of your super attacks. So not very beginner friendly if you ask me. And the morph attacks are pointless because both modes are equally powerful, so there's no motivation to go between them. So I'm sorry, this is D tier. Then we have the Charge Blade. There's a reason why the Charge Blade is sort of losing, I think, its popularity in the demo. It's a one-shot pony. It's basically telling you to just do the same SAED move. I mean, what move has to have an acronym for its special attack? How dumb is that? SAED or SAED. Anyways, in order to even do your move, there's a bullet list of grocery stuff that you have to do. You have to hit the monster, you got to charge your files, you've got to then, it doesn't even automatically charge, you've got to do an animation to charge them, otherwise you start bouncing. Then you charge your files, then you have to charge your shield, then you got to charge your files again, then you got to charge your sword, and then you got to charge your files again, and then you're ready to finally start doing some actual damage. By the time you get to this point, the hunt is probably half over. So Charge Blade, I'm sorry, D rank for me. Then finally, the last Blade Master weapon is the Insect Glaive. This thing would be nice if the Kinsect didn't move 200 meters per hour. This thing is super slow. How are you supposed to use this thing? You've got this aiming reticle to make it feel like it's a shooting game, you're gonna shoot the bug out, and then you send it out, and you can walk faster than your bug flies. By the time it reaches its destination, the monster is in map 11. It's in a completely different area. So you're stuck just using this glaive, which by its own, if you don't have a red extract, is horrifically bad. You barely do any hits, barely do any damage. Half the moves for this weapon is just to jump around, which is not going to help you kill the monster any faster. Let's look at its silkbind moves. What, you've got the double vault. I can already vault without using the silk bugs. Then you got recall kinsect. Well, yeah, I'm already recalling it all the time anyways because it's going in the wrong direction. So I'm sorry, insect glaive, you've got all this mobility, so you're great as a pogo stick and jumping around, but as a battle weapon, ugh, you're D tier. I'm sorry. And then we go to the gunner weapons. We'll start out with the bow. Could you talk about a weaker weapon in the game? Like seriously, the amount of hits you're doing on a monster is so bad. The elemental damage is horrific. You're not doing any more damage against one monster than the other. Yeah, you get unlimited arrows, which is nice, but if the arrows only do a few ticks of damage each, it really doesn't matter, right? You do get coatings, which I'll admit is very cool, so you can put a monster to sleep and stuff like that, but you only get so many. And then, if you miss a few, sorry, you're not going to put the monster to sleep unless you go all the way back to camp, grab some more files or the coatings, and then put them on. Like, come on, it's way too punishing. And then when you do get a sleep off, that's it. You're not getting a second one. Not with only, what, 20 coatings that they're giving you? So the coating system is, fun for the first few minutes of the hunt, but then it's completely made pointless. And the weapon just has really bad damage output. So I'm sorry, I gotta say, bow is D tier for me. Then going into the bowgun weapons, on paper these sound really good, right? I mean, you can pretty much just run around and shoot a monster like it's a third-person shooter. Well, the light bowgun, I think the light stands for the damage and also just how much ammo it can hold, because you're always running out. Like, they start you out with Pierce 1, which is okay. It does decent damage, but it's still just like 4s and 5s. So we're not talking like, hundreds like you can do with the other weapons. So you can do okay damage, but then you run out of ammo and you got to go and stop playing. You can't hunt the monster anymore. You got to run around the map using the wire bugs looking for ammo. If I wanted a game where I have to keep picking up my ammo, I'd go play another game. Like, the maintenance on this weapon is just ridiculously high. You do get these cool little wyvern blastings, but you only get 3 of them, and then you got to wait for them to recharge. So it's not even part of your main arsenal. You can't even say that. The one move allows you to try to cut off a tail, but it's only like 60 damage, so unless you spam this thing like 20 times, you're not cutting off anything. So light bowgun, you're flashy, you're cool, but you don't even have the tools you need to hunt. You make me run around and have to grab them. So for that, I'm putting you in D. And the same problem goes with the heavy bowgun. You think because it's heavy, it's going to do like huge amounts of damage? No, it's still got the same ammo as the light bowgun, so Pierce 1 is Pierce 1. Maybe you can shoot a few more before you have to reload, but you know what that means? You're going to run out even faster, which means you're going to have the same problem as the light bowgun of having to run around and grab your ammo, because trust me, if you're relegated to just using your melee attack, hunts are going to take way too long. The hunter arts, one of them is bugged. You can't even put away your weapon even though it says you can. And the other one is a counter shot, which takes 10,000 years to actually activate. So the DPS on that has to be really bad. So heavy bowgun, definitely D tier for me. So there's lots of room for improvement for these weapons. We still have 2 months, so hopefully they can, revamp the game and sort of improve these weapons. But from the demo, I've got to say I'm a little disappointed. Anyways, that's my tier list, just my personal opinion. Let me know down below if you agree. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy hunting. This is sarcastic, by the way. See the other video.